Stents here, also known as Alpha 5 with the Rangers Dojo, and I'm coming to you with another deck profile. Today is one of my favorite decks from the old days of Kaijudo. We're talking like sets 1 through 4. Um, this is Blurple. We call it Blurple because it's blue and purple, not black, because we don't really play black in this game. That's more of a magic thing. Um, this deck has always been focused on Cyber Lords and Chimeras, and boy, is that exactly what we got here. Um, this deck, I would call it aggro. A lot of people in the old days would call it a tempo deck, but I think it was Earth Power and CVH who originally brought up, hey, tempo is more of a concept. You either have tempo or you don't, rather than it is an archetype. But regardless, this is a really cool deck and it's a lot of fun. So let's get into it. Uh, so going by mana curve once again, starting off we got Cyber Sprite. This is a good 1 mana, 2000 power blocker. But more than that, it's a Cyberlord, so this is bait for your Evos. You're really not going to be blocking with this thing. If you are, you're in a bad spot. Chances are this is just evil bait. Moving on, we got Cyberscamp. Cyberscamp is one of the best aggro tools that the game's ever had. Um, Whenever your opponent casts a spell, you can search your deck for another Cyberscamp. Even if you don't want to grab another Cyberscamp, or you can't grab another Cyberscamp, um, you can use this to go through your deck and figure out what's in your shields, which is really, really helpful. You can say, okay, I usually play 3 copies of this Terror Pit, but I only see 1 here and I see 1 on hand. That means they must have 1 in shields. This is critical information. And this helps you kind of learn how you can play the game, so that's a big plus. Also, it's just recurring Cyberlord bait, and makes your opponent feel bad for using removal. Moving on, we got 3 Cyber Trader. Cyber Trader's a really fun card. You play it, it's another Cyberlord, of course, but you draw 1, and then you discard 1. So this lets you cycle through your deck a little bit more, pitch out the cards that aren't good in any given matchup. The tough thing is everything in this deck is kind of a value tool, so it's tough to decide what you're pitching, but it depends, like, you have to know your matchup at that point. Little known fact, this card uses the art from Marinomancer in Duel Masters, which was like an archetype defining card in and of itself. So throwback to the DM days. Next, 3 Aqua Seneschal. Cyberlord that can attack with upside. Really understated. I know that it's part of Water's kind of design space to be a little bit understated for their mana cost, but if this card was a 3 mana 3000 with upside, that would be just so much better. Right now, there are way too many good blockers, and Seneschal almost never gets its attack proc. Whatever, moving on. Next, 2 Scaradorable of Gloom Hollows. I would love to see this at 3, both because of mana ratio concerns, as we can see over here, as well as this is one of the best blockers in the game. A, it can attack. Just full stop, a 3 mana blocker that can attack with no downside is incredible. B, this helps you play the neutral game with a lot of other decks, where you can have this thing either threatening a shield or protecting your guys, and you don't have to worry about losing your blocker, because when it battles any creature that is level 4 or less, neither creature can be banished. So what that means is, let's say your opponent has a Bronze Arm Sabertooth, or an Aqua Strider, or anything 4 or less with big stats. Gloom Hollow lets your guys swing for free, as long as the other guy obviously isn't using their blocker to block. It lets your guys swing for free, and you don't have to worry about the clapback, as long as their cards aren't level 4, aren't higher than level 4. So yeah, this thing's incredible. It's also Chimera bait, which is super valuable. We're not running any Chimera evolutions in this version, but in the past, going into, I think it was Hydra Medusa, the 5 mana 5000, that's just a Terror Pit on a stick. Incredibly valuable. Next, we got 3 Screeching Scaradorables. This is another, like, high value card. When it enters the battle zone, choose target enemy creature. If it's level 2 or less, just outright kill it. Otherwise, it can't block this turn. The value in this comes from either you're neutralizing the concern of a clapback target, or you're just straight up getting rid of some removal. Some board presence, which is really, really helpful. Also important to keep in mind, the way evolution creatures work in this game, if you've got a creature on the board under some kind of status effect, such as under Screeching Scaradorable or Psychic Predator Rusalka, and then you evolve, and then your opponent evolves on top of that, That status effect remains because in the game's mind, the way the game kind of works, it's the same creature that has evolved. I guess you could think of it as Pokemon, right? If Pokemon's poisoned and then it evolves, it stays poisoned in the games. Um, Same idea here. So if your opponent wants to evolve and lose track of that, and try to get out of that, then they're still neutralized, which is incredibly valuable. Same with the tapped condition, right? If a card is tapped going into your turn under the effect of like a Lyra or a Cassiopeia or something, it will and you evolve on top of it, it remains tapped. It doesn't untap itself. So, um, yeah, for that reason, Screeching Scaradorable has a lot of utility. Next, Psychic Predator Rusalka. I always just abbreviate this to PPR. Um, PPR is one of the best offensive tools in the game, and it's super dangerous. The fact that honestly this is allowed at 3 sometimes worries me, because it single-handedly makes your opponent change their decision about how they block and when, because you have to consider that this card can't be blocked and can lock down clapback potential. So it pretty much neutralizes between 1 to 2 cards per turn, essentially. Uh, and this can really concern your opponent, especially if you have some big bodies to balance this. I will say a glaring weakness of this deck in the current build is that there are a lot of undercosted cards for their mana, and there isn't like a big beat stick in any way. So this really relies on tempo tools to keep your opponent on the back foot, keep stuff off their board, in their hand, or in the discard pile, or something else, or just neutralized with like a PPR or Screeching, and that's how you win the game. This is definitely a win by turn 6 kind of deck. If you're not there, then you are struggling. Um, Next, the other Rusalka, Aqua Chaser. Low-key, this one is better than this one. Because having a dude off your opponent's board is more valuable than having a dude sitting on your board. I know that this is unblockable, but chances are, turn 4, they don't have that many blockers. So you bounce it back, you're not worried. This has its niche uses, but this thing as a tempo tool is way better. I think overall PPR is definitely better, but as a tempo tool, like which would you play on 4? I'm probably leaning towards this one. Next, Emperor Neuron. I'm amazed to see this at 2. I think that the only reason that this is at 2 is because we just couldn't find it a third copy at some point. We definitely have the third copy now, but yeah. This is what the original deck was kind of built around. This and Hydra Medusa. 3 mana, 5,000 Cyberlord Evo. It can't be blocked, and whenever it attacks, it draws a card. So it's just much better Seneschal. However, I really wouldn't evolve this on Seneschal. I would probably put this on a Cyber Trader or a Cyber Sprite. And the reason for this is because I really don't want to invest 6 mana in a 5,000 Evo. If I can invest 4 mana in it, or 5 mana in it, and I can get 2 draws off of it very easily, then that's another thing. But Neuron, your ideal targets are Cyber Sprite and Cyber Trader. The fact that it's unblockable really kind of throws a wrench in a lot of your opponent's plans, and the fact that you keep drawing off of it really helps you replenish your hand. So this is an incredibly valuable card. Screeching Scarador, or I'm sorry, Shapeshifter Scaradorable. Evolution put on one of your creatures. So this is one of the first cards. It was actually before they introduced Civilization-based Evo, which is what made this card so novel when it first came out. It says this creature can be evolved as though it had all creature types, card names, and civilizations. So this thing is your jack of all trades. You can evolve anything onto anything with this card, which is cool, but that would be better for a 3 or 4 civ aggro. For right now, this just makes the card a little bit kind of wonky. It is recursive, though, so if it dies, you can put it back in your hand from your discard pile. So you could put this thing onto Cyber Sprites, onto Scamps, onto Traders, you can put it on Gloom Hollows, you can put it on Aqua Chasers, just whatever you want to do. Which means that this card gives your little dudes a lot of utility, but it's still it doesn't do anything on the board, which is the problem. So I think this does a really good job upgrading your smaller creatures into beat sticks, but if there's a point of weakness, this thing doesn't help you win the game. It just helps you run over blockers. Next, Emperor Dendrite. I'm surprised this card didn't get more play, and it's incredible in draft. I'm not sure if anyone ever drafted Dragon Strike, but this card is a really, really fun card in draft. Sorry, I just hit my mic. Um, One of those creatures enters the battle zone. You may return target creature that is level 5 or less from the battle zone to the owner's hand. So it's kind of like Recycle Aqua Chaser, except it has fast attack, it evolves in a Cyber Lord, and it's a double breaker. It's limited to 5 or less. But frankly, it comes out on 5. You're not super worried about that anyway. The bounce is so valuable. The bounce is so valuable. Get anything that's a concern off the board. Keep hitting shields, double break. Incredible. Um, what is a notable exclusion here is we don't have a General Finbar, which is, like I say, a notable exclusion for good reason. It's one of the best cards in the deck, but again, I think we were constrained when we built this on uh, just quantities of cards, because we built like we built so many decks all at one time. Anyway, moving on. Engulf. Uh, Shield Blast. I had to read this the first time I looked at it. I did not know what this card did. Your opponent chooses one of his or her untapped creatures in the battle zone. Return that creature to your opponent's hand. Um, this is an interesting card. It's really weird for me to see this at 3. I would have liked to see more darkness cards here. There are a lot of notable darkness cards that could go in this deck. You could play Underworld Stalkers. You could play some of the puppets. There are better evolutions. I don't know. I would have seen this better fixing in like the mana ratio a little bit. But regardless, what I do like about this card is that your opponent has to choose. And when your opponent chooses, that gets around cannot be targeted abilities. So that tricky turnip, they have to pick it back in hand uh, if they only have one card. Um, Things like a Keeper of Laws, they choose back to hand. So it puts your opponent in a tough spot sometimes. And when it's turn 3, that's great. But if you're playing this on 3 instead of a Seneschal or a Gloom Hollow or evolving something, that's not ideal at all. So, this card is best when it's played off curve, but when you play it off curve, it's less likely to be effective against your opponent. Um, so yeah, I would probably like to see this as maybe a 2 of, or just cut for more aggressive darkness cards, but uh, that's opportunity for us to kind of remake the deck. We'll see how it plays. There are possibilities that could be very strong depending on matchup. Next, 3 Bone Blades. One of the best removal spells in the game, no cap. Like, easy. One of the best removal spells in the game. Agreed. And moving on, we have 3 Grip of Despair. Well, that was weird. Grip of Despair, for those who don't know, this is a pretty common card, but for those who don't know, turn target creature from the battle zone to the owner's hand, then that player chooses and discards a card. What's fun about this card is, again, your opponent has to choose what to discard, so it could be just a kill spell with extra steps, where, oh, they only have one card in hand, so they have to discard something. Or it could make them discard like a critical resource, or if you want to get really spicy, this card doesn't say your opponent. It just says player. So if you need to get one card off the board, but you already used your Rusalka, you could bounce your own Rusalka or your own PPR or something, or your own Dendrite even if you have the mana, and then replay it, and then bounce your opponent's thing again, and that's your extra bit of removal. Um, I'm not sure what circumstance you wouldn't just play the Grip of Despair on that creature specifically, but hey, who knows? You could get spicy with it. I guess removal isn't the best circumstance. That's the only thing you could use in this deck. It'd probably be better to repeat some other effect. Um, but again, whatever, it's a possibility. It's just something to keep in mind. Finally, 3 Terror Pits. I'm not sure if this deck actually needs 3 Terror Pits. We've got a lot of removal already, but it helps with our darkness composition, so 3 is fine. Again, I would have liked to see a little bit more aggressive darkness creatures, but what are you gonna do? Terror Pits, great removal. I guess this really helps you in the aggro matchup. You should probably be winning the aggro matchup anyway, because you just kind of remove a lot of their dudes until you can out-mana them and you hit their shields and they have no blasts. So, I would say that this is probably the deck with the most shield blasts of any of the aggro decks. Uh, and I think it still needs some refinement. This is a really, really good aggro tempo based list to start out with. So, that's going to be it for me. I'll see you guys. This is Alpha 5 with the Rangers Dojo signing off. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.